President Trump is now back at the White House. He's inside after spending 3 nights at Walter Reed Medical Center with coronavirus. It was a highly choreographed return last night. You could see the president producing it himself at times. He walked out of the hospital around 6:30. He arrived back at the White House just after 7, walked across the South Lawn, up the exterior stairs, and onto the Truman balcony, where he immediately removed his mask and posed for photos.
Started wheezing.
The president gave a thumbs up. He said he felt good, but after climbing the stairs, you can see his breathing was labored. You could also see him waving to the photographer, giving the photographer orders to get pictures from behind him as well, as he was saluting to get all the opportunity shots, the great shots.
Just to make it more dangerous for her.
The White House says physical access to the president will be significantly limited and that staff will wear appropriate PPE when near him.
Wait, but I'm confused. I thought, Willie, I thought that this was nothing to worry about because the president gave this outrageously stupid, outrageously reckless, outrageously dangerous.
He called her to come up there right behind him.
Yeah, so he can get the beauty shot of his COVID.
And perhaps his droplets
droplets going out with the Washington skyline behind him. But Willie, I thought that Donald Trump said there was nothing to worry about, that go on with your life. Why would they have to limit anything other than the fact that the White House is, as the Drudge Report says, is a ghost town right now because this man has infected everybody inside the White House.
Incredible. And then what we're watching right there is he turns and walks inside without his mask, greets whoever's inside the building, the residents right there, and then shoots a video. He records a video because he wanted the sun setting behind him and the Washington Monument and that landscape, in which he said, kooky. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Tell that to the 211,424 families that are mourning someone. Don't be afraid. He said, don't let it dominate you, as if that were a choice for a coronavirus patient. And you could tell as he tried to project strength up there on that balcony that he was labored in his breathing. He did not project strength up there. He projected ignorance by not wearing his mask, and he showed to the world how serious this disease is. He could barely breathe while he was standing up there. Let's get into exactly what he said after getting that.
I just want to say really quickly, Willie, though, on that, don't be afraid.
Don't let it dominate you.
You know,
really,
in my family, there are 3 people that very close to us who we love, very close to us, that COVID could be a death sentence.
Yeah.
Could be a death sentence. Now, I don't say that for personal reasons. I'm saying I'm afraid of COVID. It's just like, I'm afraid of the sea, even though I have a boat. I'm afraid of guns, even though I own guns. Yes, I'm afraid of COVID. You don't have to be terrified of COVID. You don't have to stick your, head under the bed. But it's something to be afraid of. And if
should wear masks.
I know people, if I have friends, good friends, who weren't able to say goodbye to their mother or their father,
the number on the screen,
are their grandparents because of COVID? Because they died these sad, lonely deaths? If that's my experience, and I'm younger than a lot of people who are going to be voting in a month, less than a month, who are voting right now, I think that's everybody's experience. I think that's probably your experience. I know that's Mika's experience. We all know somebody who's had a loved one affected by this or died. And in his age, Willie, we have a neighbor and he got COVID. And for a month after he recovered from COVID, he was kind of just wandering around. We had to guide him back over to his place. He was just, again, it doesn't just impact you physically or kill you, but it impacts you mentally. And we're going to get to that study too. But everything he said was so reckless last night. And there were actually 1 or 2 really I'd say stupid, but I think they're just really bad people. 1 or 2 really bad people in the United States Senate who said, oh, yeah, COVID, there's not much to worry about with that.
Yep.
When they know it's a lie, and they know people are dying from this, and they know more people are going to die from this. And these are the same liars, Willie, the president, a liar, who said that COVID wasn't coming back in the fall. He said that in April. Even when Dr. Fauci said COVID is coming back in the fall, and the president said, no, it's not coming back in the fall. Well, we're in the fall.
He got
and
it.
The president got it, and he couldn't even breathe last night. When he got to the top of the stairs, he was wheezing last night. And his own doctor said he's not out of the woods yet. And so you're right. He's spreading it to everybody that he forces to be close to him. It's last thing I'll say, Willie, this is Barry McCaffrey. Poor Mr. Trump. He's sick. He's acting stupid. He's a danger to others. He's such a terrible example to Americans. General McCaffrey goes on to say, I've been an infantry leader in dangerous situations. We always work endlessly to minimize risk until forced into action. Here's a guy that has, how many people has he already infected, Willie? How many people is he going to infect now? How many more lives is this guy going to put in danger? He's endangered so many Secret Service
And Willie,
members.
we won't know, actually, because they don't want to do contract tracing
That's
from the
right.
SCOTUS event where everybody was about 8 people. I don't know. I've lost count how many people have walked away from that super spreader event for Amy Coney Barrett with coronavirus, and the White House refuses to do contact tracing to find out who else may have been exposed, who else may have brought it home to their families. I have a family friend who is in that audience very close to everybody who was infected, who is not well himself. And I would want to know if he's going to be okay. But no contract tracing. We wouldn't want to show what this virus really does at a super spreader event, because that would actually point out that the White House is responsible for getting people potentially deathly ill,
Well,
at the very least, very ill.
Let's not just say, let's just stop with the White House. It's all Donald Trump, Willie, the doctors.
And a bunch of stooges who won't say no.
Were dominated, you know. Mark Meadows sat there being a cheerleader when he should have. That would have been a good time to actually
Say no.
resign. Say, I'm not going to let the president risk his own life and risk the lives of Secret Service men and women and risk the lives of people inside the White House. But the stooges all went along, and Donald Trump went back to the White House in one of the most astounding, irresponsible moments that any of us have seen from a politician in our lifetime.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.